Zara pressed her face against the cold window of her small room and stared out at the endless stars. 6 months ago, she had been so excited to leave her home planet and join the research station called Harmony Station. Now she wondered if coming here had been the biggest mistake of her life. The station was huge, bigger than any city on her planet. It floated in space near a giant gas planet with beautiful rings. 12 different alien species lived and worked here together, or at least they were supposed to work together. For Zara, it felt more like she was trapped in a place where nobody wanted her. She touched the crystal growths on her arms. They were glowing a sad purple color, which meant she was feeling lonely and hurt. All Zalani had these crystals that changed colors with their emotions. Right now, she wished they would stop glowing so everyone would stop staring at her. Zara was only 18 years old, which made her young even by her own people's standards. The Zalani had only been discovered by the other alien species 3 years ago. That made them the newest and least important members of what everyone called the Galactic community. Every day Zara was reminded of just how new and unwelcome her people were. The worst part was Commander Vex. He was a Thrakari, which meant he looked like a tall human but with shiny metal-colored skin and sharp features. He was in charge of a lot of the research projects on the station. Whenever he saw Zara, he would make comments about how primitive her people were. "I still don't understand why we invited such a backward species to join our research," he had said just yesterday during a meeting. The Zalani barely discovered space travel. What could they possibly contribute to advanced science? Dr. Neela was almost worse. She was an Andromedian with long tentacle arms and cold, calculating eyes. She was supposed to be Zara's supervisor in the science department, but instead of teaching her, she only gave Zara boring jobs like cleaning equipment and organizing files. "Perhaps you could water the plants," Dr. Neela had said that morning, her tentacles waving dismissively. "That seems more suited to your people's agricultural background." Even the species that were supposed to be peaceful and kind treated Zara badly. The Aquarians looked like tall, graceful beings with blue skin and flowing movements. They were known for being gentle and wise, but they whispered about Zara in their musical language whenever she walked by. She didn't understand their words, but she could tell from their tone that they were saying mean things about her. The Cerebrals were even worse in some ways. They had large heads and claimed to be the most logical species in the galaxy. They treated Zara like she was a science experiment instead of a person. They would stare at her crystals and take notes about how they changed colors, but they never actually talked to her like she was their equal. Zara spent most of her time alone in the botanical research lab. It was a huge room filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. The smell of growing things and the soft hum of the machines reminded her a little bit of home. She took care of the hydroponic gardens, which were special gardens that grew plants without soil. Working with the plants was the only time Zara felt useful. She understood how to make them grow better than anyone else on the station. Her people had been farmers for thousands of years before they learned to travel between stars. But whenever she tried to share her knowledge with the other researchers, they ignored her or acted like her ideas were stupid. Today had been particularly bad. Zara had eaten lunch alone again, sitting at a table in the corner of the big dining hall while groups of other aliens laughed and talked together. When she had tried to join a conversation about plant biology, the group had suddenly switched to speaking in a language she didn't understand. Now she was back in her room, feeling more homesick than ever. She picked up her communication device and started typing a message to her family back home. Her fingers hesitated over the words. How could she tell them that she wanted to come home? How could she admit that she wasn't strong enough to handle being the only Zalani on the station? Her crystals flickered from purple to a darker color that was almost black. That meant she was feeling hopeless and defeated. She hated that everyone could see her emotions just by looking at her arms, but there was nothing she could do about it. The crystals were part of who she was. A soft chime from her door interrupted her thoughts. Someone was requesting permission to enter. Zara quickly wiped her eyes and checked her appearance in the mirror. Her pale blue skin looked tired and her large violet eyes were red from crying. She tried to make her crystals glow a more normal color, but emotions couldn't be controlled that easily. Come in, she called, expecting it to be another maintenance request or maybe someone delivering supplies. The door slid open and a human stepped inside. Zara had seen humans around the station, but she had never really talked to one. This one was a man who looked to be in his 20s with dark hair and kind brown eyes. He was wearing the orange uniform that meant he worked in engineering. "Hi there," he said with a friendly smile. "I'm Jake Martinez. I'm here to check your environmental controls. Someone reported they weren't working properly." Zara's crystals flashed bright red with embarrassment. The environmental controls had been acting strange for days, making her room too hot and too cold at random times. Strange noises had been keeping her awake at night. She had reported it to maintenance, but she hadn't expected anyone to actually come fix it. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "The temperature has been changing by itself, and there are odd sounds at night." Jake nodded and pulled out a small scanning device. He began checking the control panels on the wall. As he worked, Zara noticed that he didn't stare at her crystals like most people did. He also didn't seem uncomfortable around her the way other species often were. "These readings are really strange," Jake muttered, frowning at his device. "It looks like someone programmed these fluctuations on purpose. This isn't a malfunction, this is sabotage." Zara felt her crystals pulse with surprise and fear. Sabotage? But who would do something like that? Jake looked at her with concern in his eyes. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Nobody deserves to have their living space messed with like this." He continued working on the controls. "There, that should fix the immediate problems. But I want to do some more investigating to find out who did this." As Jake gathered his tools, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since arriving at Harmony Station, someone had actually listened to her and taken her problems seriously. Her crystals began to glow with a faint, warm light. "Thank you," she said softly. "Most people here don't really care about my problems." Jake paused at the door and looked back at her. "Well, I'm not most people, and for what it's worth, I think you deserve better treatment than what I've seen around here." After he left, Zara sat in her newly comfortable room and realized something important. Maybe she wasn't completely alone on this station after all. 3 weeks after Jake had fixed her room, things got much worse for Zara. She had been trying harder to fit in and contribute to the research projects, but it seemed like every effort she made only gave the other aliens more reasons to dislike her. The disaster happened during what should have been her biggest opportunity. Dr. Neela had finally agreed to let Zara help with an important experiment involving plant genetics. Zara had been so excited that her crystals had been glowing bright gold all morning. Finally, she would get a chance to show what she could really do. The experiment required using a very expensive machine called a genetic sequencer. It was worth more credits than most people on her home planet would see in their entire lives. Dr. Neela had explained how to use it very quickly, with obvious impatience in her voice. "Try to keep up," Dr. Neela had said, her tentacles moving in irritated patterns. "I don't have time to repeat everything twice." Zara had been nervous, but she thought she understood the instructions. She had worked with similar machines back home, although not ones quite so advanced. Everything had been going fine until she tried to adjust one of the settings. Her hand had slipped and she had pressed the wrong button. The machine made a horrible grinding noise and stopped working. Error messages flashed across the screen in red letters. Zara's crystals immediately turned bright red with panic and embarrassment. "What did you do?" Dr. Neela shouted, rushing over to check the machine. Her tentacles were thrashing wildly, which meant she was extremely angry. "I'm sorry, I thought I was following your instructions," Zara said, her voice shaking. "I can help fix it. Don't touch anything else." Dr. Neela snapped. "You've done enough damage already." The machine wasn't actually broken very badly. Jake would have been able to fix it in about an hour, and the parts would only cost a few hundred credits. But Dr. Neela acted like Zara had destroyed the most important piece of equipment in the galaxy. What made it truly horrible was that Dr. Neela called a meeting of the entire research team to discuss what had happened. She made Zara stand in front of everyone while she explained the accident in great detail. This is exactly why primitive species shouldn't be allowed near advanced technology, Dr. Neela announced to the room full of researchers. The Zilani clearly don't have the technical knowledge or the careful nature required for this kind of work. Commander Vex, who had been invited to the meeting, nodded in agreement. "Perhaps the Zilani should stick to whatever simple farming they did on their backwater planet," he said, his metallic skin gleaming under the lights. "We could send her back to her homeworld for additional development before allowing her to return." Other researchers in the room murmured their agreement. A few of them stared at Zara's bright red crystals and shook their heads in disapproval. Nobody spoke up to defend her or point out that the machine could be easily repaired. Zara wanted to explain that she had actually improved similar machines back home, that she had ideas for making this one work better. But every time she tried to speak, someone would interrupt her or tell her to be quiet. After the meeting, things got even worse. Word spread quickly around the station about Zara's destructive incompetence. Aliens who had previously just ignored her now actively avoided her. Some of them would cross to the other side of corridors when they saw her coming. The young aliens on the station, especially those who were related to important people like Commander Vex, decided that Zara made a perfect target for their idea of fun. The leader of this group was Kex, who was Commander Vex's nephew. Kex was a young Thrakari who thought he was much more important than he actually was. "I think our primitive friend needs to learn her place on this station," Kex had said to his group of friends from different species. "Maybe we can help her understand where she belongs." The prank started small. Zara would find her food had been moved to different tables in the dining hall, forcing her to search for it while everyone watched. Her work assignments would mysteriously disappear from the computer system, making her look disorganized and unreliable. Then the pranks got more serious. Someone reprogrammed her room's environmental controls again, but this time it was much worse than before. The temperature would swing from freezing cold to blazing hot every few minutes. Strange noises played at random times during the night, making it impossible for her to sleep. They also started putting things in her food that wouldn't hurt her, but made everything taste terrible. Zara would take a bite of what looked like perfectly normal food, only to discover it tasted like rotten eggs or bitter medicine. When Zara tried to report these problems to station security, the response was disappointing. The security officer, a bored-looking cerebral named Logic 7, barely looked up from his reports. "Pranks are a normal part of station life," Logic 7 said in his emotionless voice. "Young beings often engage in this behavior as a way of establishing social hierarchies. Perhaps you should try to fit in better rather than complaining about normal social interactions." "But they're making it impossible for me to sleep or eat properly," Zara protested. "How am I supposed to do my work?" "That sounds like a personal problem," Logic 7 replied. "Maybe you should consider whether you're really suited for life on this station." Zara left the security office feeling more hopeless than ever. Her crystals had turned that dark purple color again, the one that meant she was deeply sad and defeated. It seemed like nobody on the entire station cared what happened to her. The worst incident happened a few days later. Zara had been working late in the botanical lab, trying to catch up on research that she had fallen behind on due to lack of sleep. She had finally discovered something important about how to make the plants grow faster using a combination of techniques from her home planet and the advanced technology available on the station. When she tried to save her research to the computer system, she discovered that all of her files had been deleted. Weeks of work were gone. Not only that, but someone had planted fake evidence in her computer account that made it look like she had been stealing research from other scientists. Zara stared at the computer screen in shock. Her crystals cycled rapidly through different colors as emotions overwhelmed her. Red for anger, purple for sadness, black for despair. She felt like she was drowning in an ocean of cruelty with no way to reach the surface. That night, she sat in her room with her communication device, finally ready to type the message she had been avoiding for months. She would ask her family to arrange for her to come home. She would admit that she wasn't strong enough to handle being alone among aliens who hated her. But as she started typing, she heard a familiar sound. Someone was doing maintenance work in the corridor outside her room. Through her door, she could hear the quiet humming of someone who enjoyed their work. Zara realized it might be Jake. She hadn't seen him since he had fixed her environmental controls, but she remembered how kind he had been. For some reason, the thought of him working nearby made her feel a little less alone. She put down her communication device without sending the message. Maybe she would wait just one more day before giving up completely. Maybe things couldn't get any worse than they already were. Unfortunately, Zara was wrong about that. Things were about to get much worse before they got better. Jake Martinez had been working on Harmony Station for 2 years, and he thought he had seen everything. He was good at his job fixing machines and maintaining the station's complex systems. Most of the alien species respected humans because they were known for being excellent problem solvers and reliable workers. But lately, Jake had been noticing things that bothered him. It started when he was called to fix environmental controls in different parts of the station. The problems were always very specific and very targeted. Someone with technical knowledge was deliberately sabotaging these systems. The first time he had met Zara, Jake had immediately realized that the problems in her room weren't accidents. The programming was too precise, too calculated to be random malfunctions. Someone was making her life miserable on purpose. After that, Jake started paying more attention to what was happening around the station. What he saw made him angry. He watched as groups of aliens would suddenly stop talking when Zara approached, or deliberately speak in languages she couldn't understand when she was nearby. He saw how other species would accidentally bump into her in corridors, causing her to drop whatever she was carrying. He noticed how her assigned workspace kept getting moved to smaller and more isolated areas. He observed how her research proposals were dismissed without even being read. What bothered Jake the most was how Zara's crystal growths were always glowing sad colors now. When he had first met her, they had flickered with warmer colors when she talked about her work. Now they stayed dim purple or dark red most of the time. The breaking point came during a station-wide meeting about resource allocation. These meetings happened once a month, and all the department heads would present their reports and proposals for new projects. Jake usually didn't attend because he wasn't a department head, but this time he decided to listen from the back of the room. Zara had been given 5 minutes to present a proposal about improving the station's food production systems. Jake could see her nervousness in the way her crystals flickered between different colors, but she stood up straight and began speaking in a clear voice. "I have been studying the hydroponic systems on this station," she began, "and I believe I have found ways to increase food production by 30% while using less energy and water." Jake leaned forward, interested. This sounded important, especially since the station sometimes had problems getting supply ships on schedule. Zara continued, "By combining traditional growing techniques from my planet with the advanced technology available here, we can create more efficient growing cycles. I have spent 3 months testing these methods in the botanical lab, and the results are very promising." She activated a display screen that showed detailed charts and graphs. Jake could see that her research was thorough and professional. The data clearly showed significant improvements in plant growth rates and resource efficiency. But before Zara could finish explaining her proposal, Commander Vex interrupted her with a dismissive wave of his metallic hand. "I think we've heard enough theoretical speculation from our newest member," Commander Vex said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Perhaps we should focus on proposals from species with proven track records in advanced agriculture." Dr. Neela immediately joined in. "The Andromedians have been developing agricultural improvements for centuries," she said, her tentacles writhing with superiority. "We hardly need primitive suggestions from a species that only recently discovered space travel." Other voices around the room murmured agreement. Jake watched in disbelief as Zara's detailed research was dismissed without any serious consideration. Her crystals flared bright red for a moment before dimming to an almost black color. "But the data clearly shows," Zara tried to continue, her voice becoming smaller and less confident. "The meeting time for this presentation is over," Commander Vex announced firmly. "Let's move on to more serious proposals." Jake saw Zara's hands tremble as she gathered her research materials. Her crystals had gone completely dark now, which he had learned meant she was feeling hopeless and defeated. Several aliens in the audience were whispering to each other and looking at her with expressions of disdain or pity. As Zara walked out of the meeting room, Jake heard some of the whispered comments that followed her. "Poor little primitive. Someone should tell her this isn't a place for amateurs. Maybe she'll finally realize she doesn't belong here." Jake felt anger building in his chest. These aliens were supposed to be advanced, civilized beings, but they were acting like bullies in a school playground. He had seen Zara's research materials over her shoulder, and they looked more thorough and innovative than half the proposals that got approved in these meetings. After the meeting ended, Jake went looking for Zara. He checked her assigned workspace, but it was empty. He asked around, and someone told him she might be in the botanical lab. The botanical lab was one of Jake's favorite places on the station. It was huge and filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. The air was warm and humid, and it smelled like growing things and rich soil. It reminded him a little bit of his grandmother's garden back on Earth. He found Zara sitting on the floor between 2 rows of tall plants, almost hidden from view. She was holding her communication device with tears streaming down her blue cheeks. Her crystals were completely dark, and she looked smaller and more fragile than he had ever seen her. "Thinking of giving up?" Jake asked gently, making sure not to startle her. Zara looked up with surprise and quickly tried to wipe away her tears. "I was just checking on the plants," she said, her voice shaky. "The nighttime growth cycle requires monitoring." Jake sat down on the floor across from her, not caring that his uniform might get dirty. "Your proposal today was brilliant," he said simply. "That hydroponics improvement could revolutionize how we grow food in space." For the first time in weeks, Zara's crystals flickered with a faint, warm glow. She stared at Jake in surprise. "You were listening to my presentation?" "Every word," Jake confirmed. "And I understood enough to know that your research could solve some real problems this station has been having. The fact that those idiots dismissed it without even considering it says more about them than it does about you." Zara's crystals glowed a little brighter. "But Commander Vex is right about one thing. My people are new to space travel. We don't have centuries of experience like the other species." "So what?" Jake said firmly. "Sometimes the best solutions come from people who haven't been told that something is impossible. Your people might be new to space travel, but you've been farmers for thousands of years. That experience matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, surrounded by the gentle hum of the growing plants. Jake noticed that Zara's crystals were slowly returning to more normal colors as she calmed down. "Why are you being kind to me?" Zara asked finally. "Most people here treat me like I'm invisible, or worse." Jake thought about how to answer that question. "Where I come from, we have a saying," he said finally. "We judge people by their actions and their character, not by where they come from or how long their species has been traveling in space. You've shown more dedication and intelligence in the past few months than half the people who've been dismissing you." Zara's crystals pulsed with warm gold light. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was starting to think that maybe everyone was right about me." "They're not right," Jake said firmly. "They're just scared of change and too proud to admit that someone they consider beneath them might actually have better ideas than they do." As Jake stood up to leave, he made a decision. He couldn't stand by and watch this brilliant young scientist be driven away by prejudice and cruelty. It was time for him to do more than just offer kind words. "Zara," he said, turning back to her, "would you be willing to show me your research in more detail? I think there might be ways we can implement some of your ideas without going through the official approval process." Zara's crystals blazed with excited gold light. "Really? You would help me with that?" "Absolutely," Jake said with a smile. "Sometimes the best way to prove that something works is to just go ahead and make it work." For the first time since arriving at Harmony Station, Zara felt like she had found a real ally. Someone who saw her potential instead of just her species' short history in space. Someone who was willing to stand up for what was right, even if it meant challenging the established order. But neither of them realized how much trouble this alliance was about to cause. Jake started small. The next day he made sure to sit with Zara during lunch in the communal dining area. The large room was usually filled with groups of aliens from different species, all clustered together at their own tables. Zara had been eating alone for months. When Jake walked over to her table carrying his food tray, several conversations around the room stopped. Aliens turned to stare as the human engineer sat down across from the lonely Zalani girl. "How are the improvements coming along?" Jake asked cheerfully, as if having lunch together was the most normal thing in the world. Zara's crystals flickered with nervous but happy colors. "I've been working on the calculations you suggested," she said quietly. "I think we can start with the smaller growing chambers first." Their conversation was casual and friendly, but Jake could feel dozens of eyes watching them. He noticed how some of the other humans on the station looked curious and interested. The aliens, however, seemed either confused or disapproving. Over the next few weeks, Jake made a point of greeting Zara warmly whenever they encountered each other in the corridors. He would stop to ask about her research or share interesting technical problems he was working on. His presence alone was enough to make some of the casual cruelty stop. Kex and his group of friends found it much harder to play their pranks when Jake might show up at any moment. The human engineer had a reputation for being thorough and observant. If he caught them sabotaging Zara's equipment, there would be serious consequences. But Jake's protection of Zara created new problems. One evening, Commander Vex approached Jake in one of the station's maintenance corridors. The Thrakari's metallic features were set in hard lines, and his voice was coldly professional. "Engineer Martinez," Commander Vex said, blocking Jake's path. I wanted to have a word with you about your recent behavior. Jake set down his toolkit and faced the commander. What behavior would that be, sir? Your involvement with the Zilani, Commander Vex replied. I understand that humans have a reputation for being protective of weaker species. But you should understand that your career advancement could suffer if you continue to involve yourself in interspecies social dynamics. Commander Vex stepped closer, his metallic skin reflecting the corridor lights. Your species has done well on this station because you understand your place in the hierarchy. You're excellent technicians and reliable workers. Don't jeopardize that relationship over one insignificant alien who will probably be sent home soon anyway. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and steady. With respect, Commander, where I come from, protecting people who can't protect themselves isn't called involving ourselves in social dynamics. It's just called being human. Commander Vex's eyes narrowed. I hope you'll reconsider your position, Engineer Martinez. It would be unfortunate if your personnel file reflected poor judgment in professional relationships. After the commander left, Jake realized that his support of Zara was going to cost him more than he had initially thought, but that only made him more determined to help her succeed. The real test came when Dr. Neela attempted to have Zara removed from all research projects entirely. She called a formal review meeting, claiming that Zara's emotional instability made her unsuitable for important scientific work. The Zilani's emotional displays are disruptive to the professional atmosphere, Dr. Neela argued to the review board. Her color-changing crystals are a constant distraction, and her recent mistakes show that she lacks the careful nature required for advanced research. The review board consisted of senior scientists from different species. They nodded seriously as Dr. Neela presented her case against Zara. Jake had not been invited to the meeting, but he came anyway. Excuse me, Jake said, walking into the conference room uninvited. I have some relevant information about this review. Dr. Neela's tentacles writhed with annoyance. This is a closed meeting, Engineer Martinez. Your input is not required. Actually, it is, Jake said calmly, setting a datapad on the table. Because I've been working with Zara on implementing her agricultural improvements, and I have results that you need to see. The review board members looked at each other uncertainly. Jake activated the datapad's display, showing detailed charts and measurements. For the past month, I've been secretly implementing Zara's hydroponics improvements in the station's emergency food production systems, Jake announced. The results speak for themselves. Food production in those areas has increased by 35%, while energy consumption has decreased by 20%. The board members leaned forward to study the data more carefully. The improvements were undeniable and significant. Jake continued. The problem isn't Zara's competence or her emotional displays. The problem is that some of you are too prejudiced to recognize brilliance when it doesn't look like you expect it to. Dr. Neela's tentacles thrashed angrily. This is completely inappropriate. You had no authorization to implement unauthorized modifications to station systems. You're right, Jake admitted. I didn't have authorization, but I had results. And these results prove that Zara's research isn't just theoretical speculation. It's practical, effective science that could benefit everyone on this station. One of the board members, an elderly Aquarian named Deep Current, spoke up in her musical voice. These improvements are quite impressive. Why wasn't this research given proper consideration during the official review process? Jake looked directly at Commander Vex, who was sitting at the far end of the table. Because certain people on this station decided that Zara's species was too primitive to have valuable ideas, so they dismissed her work without actually examining it. The room fell silent. Several board members looked uncomfortable, as if they were realizing their own role in the unfair treatment Zara had received. Furthermore, Jake continued, I've been investigating the equipment malfunctions and computer problems that have been affecting Zara's work. I have evidence that these weren't accidents or mistakes. Someone has been deliberately sabotaging her research and her living conditions. Commander Vex stood up abruptly. These are serious accusations, Engineer Martinez. I hope you have solid proof to back up such claims. Jake smiled grimly and activated another file on his datapad. I have security footage of Kex and his friends reprogramming environmental controls. I have computer logs showing unauthorized access to Zara's research files. And I have technical analysis proving that the malfunctions in her equipment were deliberately programmed. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The review board members examined Jake's findings with growing concern and embarrassment. It was clear that a systematic campaign of harassment had been conducted against Zara, and that her supposed failures were largely the result of deliberate sabotage. Deep Current spoke again, her voice carrying the authority of her age and experience. This review will be postponed while we conduct a full investigation into these allegations. In the meantime, Zara will be reinstated to all research projects, and her proposals will be given proper consideration. As the meeting broke up, Commander Vex approached Jake with cold fury in his metallic features. "You've made a very powerful enemy today, human," he said quietly. "I hope you think protecting one insignificant alien was worth destroying your career prospects." Jake looked the commander straight in the eye. "Commander, if standing up for what's right destroys my career prospects on this station, then maybe this isn't the kind of place I want to work anyway." After the meeting, Jake found Zara waiting anxiously outside the conference room. Her crystals were cycling through nervous colors as she tried to figure out what had happened. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake smiled and showed her the official reinstatement notice that Deep Current had given him. "You're back on all research projects, and they're going to give your proposals proper consideration." Zara's crystals exploded into brilliant gold light, brighter than Jake had ever seen them. She looked like she might cry from relief and happiness. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how I can ever repay you for what you've done." "You don't need to repay me," Jake replied. "Just keep doing the brilliant work you've been doing. Show them all what the Zilani are really capable of." But even as they celebrated this victory, Jake knew that the real challenges were just beginning. He had made powerful enemies, and they wouldn't give up easily. The fight for Zara's place on Harmony Station was far from over. Jake's public stand created waves throughout Harmony Station that nobody had expected. The next morning, Lisa Chen from the communications department approached Zara in the botanical lab with a warm smile. "Hi there," Lisa said, extending her hand in the human gesture of friendship. "I'm Lisa. I heard about what happened at the review meeting yesterday, and I wanted to apologize for not speaking up sooner." Zara's crystals flickered with surprised but pleased colors. "You don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." "That's just it," Lisa replied. "I didn't do anything at all. I saw how you were being treated, and I should have said something." Jake showed us all what real courage looks like. Over the next few days, more humans on the station began reaching out to Zara. Mark Rodriguez from security started investigating the previous incidents more thoroughly, following up on Jake's evidence about the deliberate sabotage. Dr. Emma Thompson from the medical bay offered to study Zilani physiology, so the medical team could better understand how Zara's emotional crystal displays worked. The solidarity began spreading beyond just humans. Some of the more fair-minded individuals from other species started questioning their own behavior and assumptions. A young Aquarian named Tidesinger approached Zara with a genuine apology. "I've been swimming in shame current since the review meeting," Tidesinger said in her musical voice. "My people pride ourselves on wisdom and fairness, but I allowed prejudice to cloud my judgment. Would you honor me by collaborating on a project that combines our species' different approaches to biological research?" Zara's crystals glowed with warm, forgiving light. "I would be very happy to work with you," she said. "I think we could learn a lot from each other." But not everyone was happy with these changes. Commander Vex and Dr. Neela began working behind the scenes to undermine both Jake and Zara. They filed formal complaints about Jake's unauthorized modifications to station systems. They questioned whether Zara's research methods were actually valid according to galactic scientific standards. The tension on the station continued to build for several weeks. Then everything changed when a real emergency struck. It started with what seemed like a routine solar flare from the nearby star. Solar flares happened regularly, and the station's shields were designed to handle them. But this flare was much more powerful than anyone had predicted. The electromagnetic pulse damaged several critical systems throughout the station. The first sign of trouble came when the lights flickered, and then went out in several sections. Emergency power kicked in, but it was clear that the damage was extensive. Then came the announcement that made everyone's heart sink. "Attention all station personnel," came the voice of the station commander over the emergency communication system. "We have suffered significant damage to our life support and food production systems. All non-essential activities are suspended while we assess the situation." Jake was immediately called to join the emergency repair teams. As he worked to restore damaged systems, he began to understand how serious the situation really was. The solar flare had fried the control circuits for most of the station's hydroponic systems. Even worse, the supply ships that were supposed to arrive next week had been delayed indefinitely due to the solar activity. The station faced the possibility of running out of food within 2 weeks. Emergency meetings were called around the clock as the leadership tried to figure out how to solve the crisis. The established food production systems were completely offline, and it would take at least a month to get replacement parts and repair everything. That's when Jake remembered Zara's research. He found her in the botanical lab, working frantically to keep the few remaining plants alive with makeshift equipment. Her crystals were glowing with determined orange light as she moved between the growing chambers, manually adjusting temperature and light levels. "Zara," Jake said, "remember your hydroponics improvements? The ones I implemented in the emergency systems?" "Yes," she replied, not looking up from her work. "But most of those systems were damaged too." "But not all of them," Jake said excitedly. "The sections where we implemented your modifications are still working. In fact, they're working better than ever because your improvements made them more resistant to power fluctuations." Zara's crystals flashed with understanding. "You mean we might be able to use my techniques to get food production back online faster than the standard repair procedures?" "Exactly," Jake confirmed. "But we're going to need official approval and a lot of help to make it work on the scale we need." Within hours, Zara found herself standing in front of the station's emergency council, explaining her agricultural techniques to the same people who had dismissed her just weeks before. But this time, the situation was different. This time, people's lives depended on finding solutions quickly. The standard hydroponic systems require complex computer controls and precise environmental management, Zara explained, her voice steady despite the pressure. But the techniques my people developed over thousands of years work with simpler, more robust systems that can function even when the advanced technology fails. Commander Vex, looking tired and stressed, raised an objection. "But can these primitive methods really produce enough food to sustain the entire station?" "They're not primitive," Zara replied firmly, her crystals glowing with confident gold light. "They're proven. And yes, with the right setup, we can not only sustain the station but actually increase food production beyond normal levels." Dr. Neela, who had been silent throughout most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "What do you need to make this work?" For the next 3 days, species differences became irrelevant as everyone worked together to implement Zara's emergency food production plan. Aliens who had previously looked down on her now followed her instructions carefully, recognizing that her knowledge might be the key to their survival. Commander Vex found himself working directly under Zara's supervision, helping to set up growing chambers according to her specifications. Dr. Neela used her advanced scientific equipment to analyze and optimize Zara's techniques. Even Kex, who had been one of her worst tormentors, worked tirelessly to help convert damaged sections of the station into emergency growing areas. Jake watched with pride as Zara took command of the emergency food production efforts. Her crystals glowed with steady, confident colors as she moved through the station, solving problems and coordinating the work of dozens of specialists from different species. "Increase the humidity in Section 7, she would call out, and reduce the light intensity in Section 12. The root vegetables need different conditions than the leafy plants." Her understanding of plant biology, gained from her primitive agricultural background, provided solutions that the station's advanced technology couldn't offer. She knew which plants could grow in lower light conditions, which ones could tolerate temperature fluctuations, and how to maximize production in minimal space. By the end of the week, the emergency food production systems were not only working, but producing more food than the station's normal systems had ever generated. The crisis was over, and everyone knew who had saved them. The official recognition ceremony took place in the station's main assembly hall. Zara stood at the podium wearing a special medal that had been created just for her. Her crystals shone with brilliant gold light as she looked out at the assembled crew. "This experience has taught me something important," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the large room. "Every species in our galactic community has something valuable to contribute. We are strongest when we combine our different knowledge and perspectives, not when we dismiss each other based on prejudice or fear." The applause was thunderous and genuine. Even Commander Vex and Dr. Neela clapped, though they looked somewhat embarrassed by their previous behavior. After the ceremony, Jake found Zara in the botanical lab, which had now been expanded into a major facility under her management. Representatives from multiple species were working together on projects that combined the best knowledge from all their different civilizations. "How does it feel to be the hero of Harmony Station?" Jake asked with a grin. Zara's crystals pulsed with warm, happy colors. "It feels good to finally belong somewhere," she said. "But I never could have gotten here without your help. Why did you stand up for me when no one else would?" Jake thought about the question seriously. "Where I come from, we have a saying. The measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its strongest members, but how it protects its most vulnerable. Helping you wasn't just the right thing to do. It was the human thing to do." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "I want to make sure that other young Zilani who come to this station never have to go through what I experienced. Will you help me create programs to prevent this kind of discrimination from happening again?" "Absolutely," Jake replied. "And I think you'll find that a lot of other people want to help with that too." As they talked, Zara's communication device chimed with an incoming message. It was from her family back home, responding to the report she had sent about her success on the station. "We are so proud of you," the message read. "You have shown the galaxy what the Zilani are truly capable of. The whole planet is celebrating your achievements." Zara smiled as she read the message, her crystals glowing with deep,